So time then for the press preview. Our first look at what is on the front pages as they arrive here at Sky. We're going to see what's making the headlines tonight with the Daily Mirror columnist Susie Boniface and the columnist for The Times and Sunday Times, Matthew Syed. Evening to you both. Speak to you in a moment. Let's see what is on then some of those front pages, starting with The Telegraph, leading on the Duchess of Cambridge visiting the tribute to Sarah Everard on Clapham Common and describing her own fears of walking in London at night. That's also on the front of the Express. The headline there simply for Sarah. And in the Mail with the headline, Kate joins the vigil for Sarah. The Observer says the government has been deluged with the personal stories of thousands of women who say they've faced harassment and are demanding new laws to protect them. And the Star pays tribute to the Formula One commentator Murray Walker, who's died at the age of 97. And I'm joined tonight by Susie Boniface and Matthew Syed. Great to see you both this evening. Thanks for being with us. The papers really being published a little bit too late to get that breaking news in this evening about the scuffles, the arrests, the clashes, however you like to describe them, that took place on Clapham Common this evening. Matthew, we can actually look at some of the footage now. I mean, really worrying scenes, and clearly there is a huge political fallout from this.
Yes, I had some doubts about the legislation. The risk of transmission when people are outside is quite low. So I felt that it was rather too onerous. And I think a lot of the public felt the same way. These scenes do look extremely disturbing. I can certainly understand why people might draw the inference from what we're seeing that the police has been heavy-handed. But I'm a bit old-fashioned, sitting and looking at pictures from where I am in my living room, still pictures that will doubtless appear on the later editions of the newspapers. I think we should wait and see exactly what other people have to say, what the evidence is, police testimony, the testimony of people on the ground, to get as much of the context as possible before we reach a definitive judgment about what is a politically highly explosive scenario.
Yeah, let's take a look at the front page of The Observer. The headline there going with pressure grows for new laws to curb violence against women. Susie, it was always going to be very tricky, this, wasn't it? Telling people that they can't go and have this vigil as they wanted to, and yet knowing that people probably would turn up. And we're in the middle of a pandemic. It's very, very difficult. But you do wonder why perhaps the police couldn't just sort of stand back and monitor things this evening. But as Matthew says, it's very hard without all the facts. But right, you think, the Home Secretary to call for this investigation so soon?
I don't think we need to wait too long for very many facts, because there's an awful lot of video footage coming out showing women that are sitting peacefully at the bandstand being grabbed and dragged off Clapham Common while they're marking the death of a woman who was dragged off Clapham Common. There doesn't need to be a huge inquest or sit and wait for the context of that. The context of that is disgusting. And it's not really, I don't really care whether it's Cressida Dick or Priti Patel or anybody whose responsibility it is. Whoever decided to send the heavies in needs to go. And whoever decided at the Metropolitan Police earlier this week that they would not engage with the protesters and would not discuss with them the ways that they could hold this vigil safely and securely should also go, because that decision will have happened right at the top somewhere. And whoever decided not to engage, to not put anything in writing, as the organisers have said, and to not sit down with them and all discuss the way that this could be held safely, as they did with Extinction Rebellion protesters last year, as they did with the Black Lives Matter protesters, as they do with football teams regularly, whoever made that decision is ultimately responsible for what's happened here today. And we need to remember that whatever you think about what's been going on there at Clapham Common, there is a mother tomorrow who is marking Mother's Day without her daughter because she was walking home one night, got into someone's car somehow, and ended up having to be identified from her dental records during the course of the week. And how does that mother feel looking at the footage of the women peacefully marking her daughter's disappearance and tragic death?
Yeah.
And how do they feel about it? I've got to explain it to my 5-year-old tomorrow. It was International Women's Day on Monday, and here we are, before a whole week even has passed, and women who are peaceful are being physically dragged away from marking the death of a woman. It's astonishing. It's tone deaf. It's incredibly immoral and illogical, to even a complete lack of common sense. Whoever is running that operation actually on the ground there tonight. But it was peaceful all during the day. And I think we should also remember that tomorrow, and as you know, the fallout of this starts trickling through, people are going to start briefing, and we're going to start hearing the line of, well, the police did ask them to stay away, you know, and they did turn up, and they probably shouldn't have done. The police told everybody to stay away day and night. The future Queen of England turned up and ignored the police today. Kate was there, ignoring the police advice to stay away. And if she can do it, then there's no reason that the rest of us can't.
Well, let's talk about that in a bit more depth then, because the front of the Sunday Telegraph shows a picture of Kate, her tribute as she recalls how it felt to walk in London at night herself. Of course, before she became part of the royal family. And interestingly, Matthew, there's also an analysis piece here. Duchess's flowers have a pointed political message for the Prime Minister. She obviously thought a great deal before she went and made this very public statement.
Yeah, and one can fully understand it, because the amount of testimony that we've heard this week from women who have spoken with great eloquence and poignancy about not feeling safe on the streets, particularly late at night. I mean, it has been, I think, a wake-up call of a really quite profound kind for at least that half of society that I'm a representative of. So I think it was a very dignified visit by Kate to the vigil. But just one thing on the police response. You might remember, Susie rightly pointed out that there's been some inconsistency in how the police has responded. But you might remember with the Black Lives protests, the Black Lives Matters protests, that the police were severely criticised for not properly enforcing the law. And I just think, you know, I'm not in any way defending the police. The images that Susie described, they are extremely damaging and chastening, and one feels angry about them. All I'm saying is that before reaching a definitive conclusion, I mean, it's on the same night that it happened. Due process, I think, requires us to at least hear their explanation, to probe their explanation, to test it severely, but nevertheless to listen before making a judgment. I've been shocked on Twitter to see the person currently accused of the crime being described as a murderer. There is a presumption of innocence in this country. The rule of law is the most fundamental thing that keeps our society safe. We need to strengthen it in the case of women's safety, for sure. But we must nevertheless repeat the mantra that the rule of law is sacrosanct.
I want to be careful not I want to be careful not to go into the details of the case, obviously, with someone having been charged. But Susie, jump back in.
There is a rule of law, and the rule of law says you can't be arrested without good reason. Sitting down next to a bandstand isn't a good reason to me, even during a pandemic. It also says that women should feel safe walking home, and they don't. And it says that we should be able to trust the police, and also that the police with our consent. What happened tonight, I don't live in London. I'm not policed by the Metropolitan Police anymore. I did do a few years ago, but this does not happen with my consent. And I'm no barrister, but I'm pretty certain it's illegal to screw women without their consent. And what's happened today on Clapham Common has screwed every woman in this country.
And we've just got about 30 seconds before the break, but I want to ask you both this. Susie, where do you think we go next after what has been a horrific week or so?
I hope we have a fair trial without any contempt of court issues, and that the main suspect in the murder gets his hearing that he should have, and that Sarah gets justice. That's the most important thing. And Matthew, I hope that tomorrow everyone remembers they've all got a mother. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. And Matthew, you've done a lot of work with young men, with boys as well. You've written about it a great deal. And, you know, education is key to this as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely fundamental. I had a letter today, an email from my son's school, where the one of the teaching staff has said that they want. I mean, my son is 7 years old. I think it's absolutely crucial that young men, he's a boy, he'll become a teenager, understand the sensitivities, understand that walking too close to a woman on their own late at night is completely unacceptable, to understand the constraints that ought to exist so that we but the other thing I think that I'd like to come out with this is new legislation. The number of people who are convicted of crimes when women come forward for harassment, groping and other things of that kind is far too low. And I think the government needs to come up with really clear recommendations of how the law can be strengthened to ensure that the law does its bit in what I think will be I hope very much, a big cultural shift.
Yeah, so grim, isn't it, on so many levels. Susie, Matthew, thank you for the moment. Coming up, we're going to be talking about the death of the Formula One commentator, Murray Walker. That's in a couple of minutes. Welcome back. Part two of the press preview. Still with me, Daily Mirror columnist Susie Boniface and the columnist for The Times and Sunday Times, Matthew Syed. Matthew, let's look at the front page of the Daily Star. I mean, what a legend Murray Walker was. And today we've been remembering him and watching back some of the classic clips.
Yeah, an absolutely fantastic sports commentator. His enthusiasm was infectious. He commentated at a time when sport was often covered on terrestrial, on network television, and would command viewing figures above 10 million, sometimes over 20 million. And so these people were not kind of, people like Murray Walker and David Coleman and Peter Alliss, who also the golf commentator who passed away recently. They were kind of like evangelists, taking sport to people who may have switched over onto BBC Two without a deep interest in golf or athletics or Formula One. And I think Murray Walker was one of the iconic figures of sport. Some of the testimonies that have come out in tribute to him have been extremely moving, from Damon Hill and Sir Jackie Stewart, and he will be very sorely missed.
Yeah, and that voice was just so incredible, wasn't it? You're absolutely right. We really will miss him. Moving on to the front of the Observer, Susie, collapse of trade with the EU will last until the summer.
Yeah, now, if you're pro-Brexit, you'd probably call this a wrinkle and teething trouble. And if you're anti-Brexit, you'd say this is what you knew it was going to be like all along. The issue is whether it lasts past the summer and whether actually what's going to happen after this is going to be structural. Of course, the government has extended unilaterally some of the border controls until the summer. And of course, if we get to the summer and you've still got this issue with both imports and exports being many billions of pounds lower than they were this time last year, then whether the government decides to unilaterally extend them again and how long they can keep doing that and how long businesses can keep surviving.
Matthew?
I agree with that completely. I was extremely troubled by the unilateral extension, just as I was by the breaching of the rule of law last year. Trust in international affairs is of massive importance, and I think the government is squandering a commodity that takes generations to build up. I also agree with Susie completely that if this turns out to be teething trouble, so well and good, but it's not looking that way. And this, I think, is going to be a story that will run and run.
Yeah. Well, after what has been a desperately sad and miserable week, let's end with something to smile about. And as always, Matt, the cartoonist, delivers Susie for the Sunday Telegraph. Great little cartoon here. Mum, you fed me... This is a child speaking to his mother. Mum, you fed me, looked after me and homeschooled me. You really should have remembered to buy yourself some Mother's Day flowers. Susie.
Yeah. And you can tell that cartoon was drawn by a bloke, because apparently that mum only did 3 things for her kid his whole life. But left out teaching him to tie his shoelaces, wipe his own bum, look after him, go out to work, buy his furniture, teach him to do his trousers up, and everything else. That's just like in a morning. That's an average mum's work. Get the woman to do the cartoon, you'd find it was a proper list.
Do you know what? This actually happened to a friend of mine today. She said that she said to her children, anything you need from the shops, I'm nipping out. And her 13-year-old son said to her, oh, yeah, could you get some flowers? It's Mother's Day tomorrow. Matthew, you've got flowers behind you, but have you remembered Mother's Day? Because, of course, we have to remember our own children doing their mother and our own mothers as well.
Well, actually, I'm glad to say I don't think my wife is watching at the moment. I think she's gone to bed. But I did post a card. If my mother's watching, we did post a card for you. And I went out with our two children today and
You're all
gifts
sorted
for my wife. So, yeah, we're okay.